Hey girlfriends, how's everybody doing? I'm Sheila. Welcome to Sister Girl Second Act. Today's topic is called You Don't Have to Move Overseas to Thrive After 60. Have you noticed how many people are talking about moving overseas after retirement? Portugal, Spain, Asia, Thailand, Mexico. Everywhere you turn, someone is telling you how much cheaper it is to live overseas. And I've been thinking about it too. I'm guilty myself. And, while I understand the appeal, because I've been researching it myself, the more I research, the more I find myself asking other questions. You know what I mean? Do we really have to move overseas to create the life that we want after 60? Maybe. Just maybe. But you know what? There's another option. What if instead of becoming bicontinental, we become bicoastal? Okay, hold a minute now. Hear me out. For some of us, especially if we're living primarily on Social Security, myself included, moving overseas can involve getting, number one, a passport, applying for visas, residency requirements, financial documentation, learning another healthcare system, the language, taxes, banking, and depending on the country, just a whole lot of paperwork. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm still intrigued, like I said, about the idea of becoming bicontinental one day. But I need more time because I want to understand what's very important to me, the health care, okay? I want to know what happens if I need emergency surgery. Can I get prescriptions if I need them? How much do they cost? What happens if I need a CPAP machine, which I've used to help me breathe at night? And what if I decide I want to come home? Those are questions I needed answered before taking on such life-changing, decisions. Now, I have lived overseas before. When I was first married, I should say married to my first husband, he was in the military and we were stationed in Germany. Back then, life was so much simpler. And as I remember, all I needed was a passport and I think it was my birth certificate. We rented a small apartment off base and eventually I got a job working in the cafeteria, which was on base. It was a wonderful experience and I'm glad, I'm grateful for it. During the day when I wasn't working, I remember riding around with a friend of mine who knew the area, and I was just, basically just touring the countryside, But looking back, I also realized we were somewhat protected by the military community. It wasn't like we were just thrown into the country by ourselves, you know what I mean? And that's very different from relocating overseas independently as a retired woman. So while I'm still exploring the idea, I'm also exploring something else. Maybe there's other ways to create the lifestyle we're looking for. Now, sometimes, and this is option one. I got my little fan here because it is hot as I don't know what. Woo. Sometimes all we need is a change of scenery. Imagine spending 6 months on the East Coast and 6 months on the West Coast. This is just a scenario. Or maybe 6 months in the Mid-Atlantic and 6 months in Oregon or Washington. You stay in the U.S., you're still under familiar systems, you're closer to family, you don't have to navigate visas or residency requirements, and maybe the fresh start you're looking for isn't across an ocean. Maybe it's simply across the country, you know? 1 second. Sorry, I don't like to get calls when I am doing the video. What was I saying? You don't have to navigate visas or residency requirements. Maybe the first start you're looking for isn't across the ocean. Maybe it's just simply across the country. Now, then there's option 2. And this is the one I was actually thinking about. You keep your home and rent it out. And I think this is probably one of my favorites. Suppose you own your own home, whether it's be a house, a condo, etc. Instead of selling it, what if you rented it out? That rental income could help pay for an apartment somewhere else while you experience life in another city. And if you discover that you don't like it there, you still have your home. You're not closing one chapter before you're sure about the next. You're simply giving yourself some options. Now, option 3. Housing is expensive. I say, what about sharing a place with a trusted girlfriend? Housing is expensive, but maybe you have a girlfriend that's in the same situation. She's also living primarily on Social Security. She'd also like to have a fresh start. What if the two of you rented a small place together? You split the expenses. You have companionship. You explore together, and you create new memories in this next chapter. Of course, you'd want to have a very honest conversation beforehand about, finances, privacy, who gets a bigger bedroom, responsibilities, expectations, etc. But for the right friendship, it could be a wonderful way to create a new style. Option 4, downsize. Maybe it's time to ask yourself, do I really need this much house anymore? I know I downsized from a 4-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom condo. My children were grown, and I only was living in like half of the house, So perhaps downsizing isn't giving something up. Perhaps it's gaining something. I know it's less maintenance for me. It's lower expenses, more freedom, more life. You may even have extra money from the sale of your home to help support this next chapter of your life. And option 5, become a nomad right here at home. You've heard about how you can go overseas, and instead of just like living in one place for a certain amount of time, whether it's 180 days, etc., etc., etc. You become a nomad and just bounce from here to there. Well, who says you have to move overseas to do that? Many people are already doing it here in the United States. Some travel in vans, some in RVs, some in tiny homes on wheels. Others simply rent furnished apartments for a month or two before moving on to another city. The point that I'm trying to make is it isn't how you travel. The point is giving yourself permission to experience life differently. A change of scenery can be uplifting. Oh my goodness. It can refresh your spirit. And it can introduce you to people and places you would have never encountered if you stayed in one place. And the beautiful part, it doesn't have to be permanent. Maybe you rent your home while you explore another city. Then, when you're ready, you come home on your own terms. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to give you some real talk here, okay? A lot of times, I try to say the things that people think. That's just how I am. I talk a lot, and I know for myself, there's like sometimes there's questions that I want to ask, but I won't say them out loud, because I don't know how the person's going to react. But before I close, can we have a little real talk? Before you make any life-changing decision, I want you to think about something. Okay, many of the people encouraging you to relocate overseas have built businesses around helping people make that move. There's nothing absolutely wrong with that. But once you've relocated, you're the one who has to live with the decisions you made, not them. So before you take that leap, ask yourself the questions that often don't always get asked. What happens if you run out of money and need to come back to the U.S.? Do you have enough money for a plane ticket home? Prices rise all the time, so even if you got a return ticket, you might not be able to use it depending on the pricing and everything else. You never know. And do you have somewhere to live? What happens over there if your landlord raises your rent? Can you navigate another country's housing system? What happens if you need emergency surgery? Do you understand the healthcare system? Who's your emergency contact on the ground? Who would advocate for you if something happens? These aren't reasons not to dream. They're reasons to dream with your eyes wide open. Because moving overseas isn't impossible. It simply deserves thoughtful planning. And while you're figuring all of that out, don't forget, you have options. The more I think about it, the more I realize this conversation isn't really about moving overseas. It's about giving ourselves permission to imagine another way of living. Maybe overseas is still your dream. Maybe becoming bicoastal feels more realistic. Maybe you'll discover you'll become a nomad in your own country. Whatever you decide. I hope today's conversation has given you a few things worth exploring, and I'd love to hear from you. Which option intrigued you the most? Would you become bicoastal? Would you rent out your home? Would you share a place with a trusted girlfriend? Or would you become a nomad in your own country? Or do you have another idea? Leave me a comment below because I'd love for us to learn from one another. And until next time, remember, it's never too late to create your own lifestyle portfolio. You want me to say that again? It's never too late to create your own lifestyle portfolio. All right now, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.